The transport ship Horizon drifted through the quiet darkness of space, its engines humming softly as it carried its small crew toward the outer colonies. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair, watching the stars blur past the viewport. He had made this run dozens of times before, ferrying supplies and personnel to remote stations where few others bothered to travel. It was boring work, but it paid well and kept him flying. Behind him, pilot Amy Carter checked the navigation systems for the third time that hour. She was young and eager, always double-checking her work even when nothing seemed wrong. Jake appreciated her attention to detail, even if it sometimes bordered on excessive. "All systems normal, Captain," Amy reported, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "We should reach the waypoint in about 6 hours." Jake nodded and stood up, stretching his back. The Horizon was not a large ship, and spending weeks in its cramped corridors always left him stiff. He walked toward the rear compartments, where the rest of his crew worked at their various tasks. In the engine room, Marcus Webb was elbow-deep in one of the power converters, muttering to himself as he adjusted something with a wrench. Marcus was the kind of engineer who could fix anything with whatever materials he had on hand. He had kept the aging Horizon running long past when most ships would have been scrapped. "How are we looking, Marcus?" Jake asked, leaning against the doorframe. Marcus pulled his head out of the machine and wiped grease from his hands. "She will hold together. This converter has been making odd noises, but I think I found the problem. We should be fine for another few months before we need a real overhaul." Jake smiled and continued down the corridor to the small medical bay where Lisa Grant was organizing supplies. She looked up as he entered, her calm eyes meeting his. "Just doing inventory," Lisa explained. "We are running low on some medications, but nothing critical. I can restock at the next station." "Good to hear," Jake replied. He trusted Lisa completely. She had saved his life once during an accident 3 years ago, and her steady hands and quick thinking had earned his permanent respect. The last crew member, Derek Cole, was in the cargo bay running through his daily exercise routine. Derek had served in colonial security before joining the Horizon, and he maintained his training even though they rarely faced any real danger. He was doing pull-ups on a maintenance bar when Jake found him. "You know we have artificial gravity, right?" Jake joked. "You do not need to stay that fit." Derek dropped down and grabbed a towel. "Old habits. Besides, you never know when you might need to be in shape." Jake was about to respond when Amy's voice crackled over the intercom, urgent and sharp. "Captain, we have a problem. Unknown vessel just appeared on sensors. It is big, and it is heading straight for us." Jake ran back to the bridge, Derek right behind him. Amy's fingers flew across the controls as she tried to get more information about the approaching ship. "Can you identify it?" Jake asked, sliding into his chair. "Negative. It does not match any known registry. The design is completely foreign," Amy said, her voice tight with worry. "And, Captain, it is not slowing down." The viewport suddenly filled with light as a massive ship materialized in front of them. It was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. All sharp angles and dark metal, easily 10 times the size of the Horizon. Strange symbols glowed along its hull, pulsing with an eerie red light. "Hail them," Jake ordered, though he already knew it was pointless. Before Amy could try, the Horizon shuddered violently. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Marcus's voice came through the intercom. Panicked. "Captain, they hit us with some kind of beam. My engines just went dead. Everything is shutting down." Jake watched helplessly as the alien ship moved closer. He could see now that it had massive arms extending from its sides, reaching toward the Horizon like the limbs of some mechanical predator. "All hands, brace for boarding," Jake called out, knowing how useless the order was. They had no weapons, no way to fight back against whatever was about to happen. The arms clamped onto the Horizon's hull with a grinding screech of metal. Jake felt the ship shake as something cut through the outer airlock. Within minutes, the bridge door burst open, torn from its hinges as if it were made of paper. The creatures that entered were nightmares made real. They stood over 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. 6 limbs extended from their torsos, 4 of which ended in clawed hands while the other 2 resembled legs built for both walking and leaping. Their heads were angular and predatory, with multiple eyes that glowed a sickly yellow color. When they opened their mouths, rows of sharp teeth gleamed in the emergency lighting. Jake, Amy, and Derek were grabbed before they could react. The aliens were incredibly strong, lifting them as easily as Jake might lift a small child. He heard Lisa and Marcus crying out from other parts of the ship as they too were captured. The aliens spoke to each other in a series of clicks and growls that Jake could not understand. They seemed almost excited, examining the humans with what looked like curiosity and anticipation. One of them, larger than the others and wearing some kind of ornamental armor, approached Jake and tilted its head as it studied him. The creature reached out with one clawed hand and pressed something against Jake's neck. He felt a sharp pain, and then nothing. His vision began to blur at the edges. The last thing Jake saw before darkness took him was the alien's mouth opening in what might have been a smile, revealing those terrible teeth. He realized with growing horror that they were not being rescued or even captured for ransom. They were being collected. When Jake woke up, he found himself in a large metal cage. The walls hummed with energy, and through the transparent barrier he could see his crew members in similar cages nearby. Beyond them, he could see dozens of other cages holding creatures he had never seen before. All different species, all looking terrified. A massive screen flickered to life above them, showing one of the aliens. It began speaking, and somehow Jake could understand the words. Perhaps due to whatever they had injected into him. Welcome, humans, to Kreloth Prime. You have been selected for the great honor of participating in the eternal hunt. We are the Krelothi, the greatest predators in the galaxy, and for thousands of generations we have tested our skills against the finest prey the universe has to offer. The alien's eyes seemed to glow brighter with enthusiasm. You will be released into our hunting preserves, where our noble class will pursue you through various terrains. Your survival time will be measured and celebrated. Those of you who last the longest will be remembered in our records. This is a tradition older than your species, and none have ever escaped. The holding cells were cold and sterile, designed to process prey species efficiently. Jake spent what he guessed were 2 days watching Krelothi guards move other captives through corridors toward unknown destinations. Some of those prisoners never came back. The ones who did return looked broken, their eyes empty, and their bodies covered in fresh scars. On the 3rd day, the guards came for Jake's crew. They were dragged from their cages and forced to stand in a processing line with members of other species. Jake counted at least 8 different alien races, all of them looking terrified. One species with 4 arms and gray skin tried to speak to him, but the guards struck it down before any words could be exchanged. The processing was methodical and humiliating. The humans were stripped of their clothing and given simple fabric wraps that provided minimal coverage. Their bodies were scanned by machines that hummed and clicked, recording data that appeared on screens the guards studied with interest. Then came the implants. A Krelothi technician approached each human with a device that looked like a cross between a drill and a syringe. Jake felt the cold metal press against the back of his neck, right at the base of his skull. There was a moment of intense pressure, then searing pain as something was injected deep into his tissue. He gritted his teeth to keep from screaming, refusing to give them the satisfaction. When all 5 humans had been implanted, they were herded into a transport vessel. Through the windows, Jake caught his first glimpse of Kreloth Prime. The planet was beautiful in a terrible way, with rings of purple and blue gas surrounding it. The surface showed diverse terrain, ranging from dense jungles to barren deserts to frozen tundra. All of it carefully maintained as hunting grounds. The transport descended toward a thick jungle region. Trees taller than any skyscraper Jake had seen rose from the ground, their canopies creating layers of shadow and filtered light. Somewhere in that wilderness, they would be released like animals, and the Krelothi would come for them. Before they were pushed out of the transport, one of the guards spoke to them through a translator. Your implants track your location and vital signs. They also translate our language so you can understand when we speak. Run far, humans. Make the hunt interesting. The longer you survive, the greater the honor for whoever claims you. The guard's mouth split open in that terrible smile. No prey has ever lasted more than 10 planetary rotations. The record holder was a species called the Vorum. They were ambush predators on their own world, and lasted 9 rotations before being taken down. You humans look weak and slow. I doubt you will last 3. Then they were pushed from the transport into the jungle below, falling through layers of branches before hitting the ground hard. Jake rolled with the impact, his old training from his youth helping him avoid serious injury. The others landed nearby, groaning and picking themselves up. The transport lifted away, leaving them alone in the jungle heat. The sounds of strange creatures filled the air, along with the rustle of alien vegetation in the wind. Jake gathered his crew together, checking each of them for injuries. Derek had a cut on his arm, and Amy had twisted her ankle, but overall they had survived the drop intact. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked, looking around nervously at the shadows between the trees. Jake forced himself to think clearly despite the fear clawing at his mind. "First, we need to deal with these implants. Lisa, can you remove them?" Quote. Lisa examined the back of her own neck, feeling the small lump where the device had been inserted. "I can try. But I do not have any tools or anesthetic. It will hurt, and there is risk of infection or nerve damage." "Do it anyway," Jake said. "If they can track us, we cannot run. We cannot hide. We need to get these out." Lisa found a sharp rock and cleaned it as best she could with some of the fabric from their wraps. She started with her own implant, gritting her teeth as she cut into the back of her neck. Blood ran down her skin, but her hands remained steady. After several agonizing minutes, she pulled out a small metallic device about the size of a grain of rice. She dropped it on the ground and crushed it under her heel. One by one, she removed the implants from the others. Jake went last, feeling the sharp pain as Lisa dug the device from his neck. When it was over, they were all bleeding but free from the tracking system. "That will buy us time," Derek said, already scanning the jungle for threats. "But they will notice eventually. We need to move." They started walking, having no real direction but knowing they needed distance from the drop point. The jungle was oppressive, the humidity making it hard to breathe. Strange insects buzzed around them, and occasionally they would see movement in the canopy above, creatures watching them with alien eyes. After several hours of walking, they came across a stream. They drank deeply, the water tasting strange but clean enough. While they rested, Marcus noticed something downstream, partially hidden by vegetation. "Look at that," he said, pointing. It was a structure, small and covered in vines, but clearly artificial. They approached carefully and found it was some kind of supply station. The door was locked with an alien keypad, but Marcus studied it for a moment before attempting to bypass the system. His engineering knowledge translated well enough, and after a few tries, the door slid open. Inside were supplies meant for Kralathi hunters. There were containers of some kind of food, medical supplies that looked advanced, and most importantly, basic tools and communication devices. Marcus grabbed one of the devices and began examining it. "This is interesting," he said, his fingers tracing the alien circuits. "Their technology is powerful, but not as complicated as I expected. I think I can understand how it works." They took what supplies they could carry and moved on, not wanting to stay in one place too long. As the jungle began to darken with the coming of night, they found a hollow between massive tree roots and made camp there. Derek took first watch while the others tried to rest. Jake lay awake, staring up at the alien sky visible through gaps in the canopy. 2 moons hung overhead, casting strange shadows. He thought about the Kralathi, about their confidence that no prey ever escaped, that arrogance might be their weakness. The next morning, they heard it. A sound in the distance. Something moving through the jungle with purpose. The sound of something hunting. They moved quickly and quietly, using hand signals to coordinate their movements. Derek led them through thick undergrowth, trying to mask their trail, but the hunter found them anyway. It emerged from the shadows between the trees. A Kralathi warrior in light armor, carrying what looked like a sophisticated rifle. The alien's multiple eyes focused on them, and its mouth opened in what might have been satisfaction. 5 humans, all together. How convenient, the hunter said, its translated voice echoing in their minds. You removed your implants. That shows more intelligence than most prey. But it will not save you. I am Kraxon, and I will add your skulls to my trophy wall. The Kralathi raised its weapon, but Jake was already moving. He grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it at the hunter's eyes, while shouting for the others to scatter. The alien roared in surprise and anger, firing blindly. The shot missed Jake by inches, burning a hole through a tree trunk. They ran in different directions, a tactic Derek had suggested during their planning. The Kralathi could only chase one of them at a time. Jake heard the hunter pursuing him, crashing through the undergrowth with terrifying speed. Despite its size, it moved with deadly grace. Jake ducked under branches and leaped over roots, his heart pounding. He could hear the Kralathi getting closer, could hear its breathing, heavy and eager. He knew he could not outrun it forever, but he did not need to outrun it. He needed to outlast it. That was when Jake remembered something from his youth, from history lessons about human evolution. Humans were not the strongest or fastest predators on Earth, but they were persistence hunters. They could run for hours, days even, wearing down prey that was faster but had less endurance. Jake forced himself to maintain a steady pace, not sprinting but running at a speed he could maintain. Behind him, the Kralathi charged forward in bursts of incredible speed, getting close before having to slow down, its breathing becoming labored. After an hour, Jake was tired but still moving. The Kralathi's pursuit had become less aggressive, more frustrated. After 2 hours, Jake could no longer hear the hunter behind him at all. He slowed to a walk, his legs burning but functional. He had done something the Kralathi had not expected. Word of the human survival spread through the Kralathi hunting networks faster than Jake expected. Through the stolen communication device Marcus had been studying, they listened to the hunters discussing them with a mixture of annoyance and interest. Most dismissed their initial survival as luck. A few spoke of the humans with something that might have been respect. Lord Vraxus, the High Huntmaster, addressed the hunting council in a broadcast they intercepted. His voice carried absolute authority and a hint of displeasure. 1 rotation has passed, and the human prey still lives. This is unexpected but not unprecedented. The Vorim survived 9 rotations, as you all know. These humans show cunning, but they remain prey. I trust our hunters will restore the natural order soon. Any who fail to claim these humans will face dishonor. Jake and his crew had spent that rotation learning. They found another supply cache, and Marcus worked tirelessly to understand the Kralathi technology. He discovered that the alien power sources were incredibly efficient but relied on specific frequencies. He also learned that the Kralathi used a universal communication network with minimal encryption, probably because they never imagined their prey would be smart enough to listen in. Lisa made an important discovery while examining the first aid supplies they had gathered. The Kralathi had tough scales, but their joints were vulnerable spots where softer tissue connected the armored plates. She also noticed that they seemed to rely heavily on their multiple eyes, which meant blinding or disorienting them could be highly effective. Amy used her navigation skills to map the preserve as they moved through it. She identified patterns in the terrain and noticed that certain areas seemed to have sensor blind spots, places where the monitoring systems did not function as well. These became their safe zones, places they could rest without being immediately located. Derek trained them in basic combat tactics. None of them were soldiers, but Derek had enough experience to teach them how to move quietly, how to set simple traps, and most importantly, how to work as a team. The Kralathi hunted alone, bound by their cultural rules about honor and individual glory. Humans could coordinate, communicate, and support each other in ways the aliens did not expect. On the 4th rotation, they encountered another species that had survived in the preserve. The creatures were small and insect-like, with 6 legs and compound eyes. They communicated through a series of chirps that the translator implants interpreted. "You are the humans," the creature said, its voice coming through as clicks. "We have heard the hunters speak of you. They are angry that you still live." "How long have you been here?" Jake asked. 3 cycles of the seasons. My people were brought here in large numbers. Now, Only 7 of us remain, hiding in the deep places. We have learned the hunter patterns. We know their ways. The insect creature, who identified itself as Rix, shared valuable information. The Kralathi always hunted during the day because their vision was optimized for bright light. Their sense of smell was poor. Unlike many predators, most importantly, they never cooperated during hunts because claiming another hunter's kill was considered a terrible crime in their culture. Each hunter worked alone, competed alone, and succeeded or failed alone. They are not used to prey that thinks ahead, Rix explained. They expect fear and panic. They expect running. They do not expect planning. Armed with this knowledge, Jake's crew began to change their strategy. Instead of just surviving, they started preparing. They mapped the locations of supply caches and memorized the patrol patterns of the hunting vessels that passed overhead. Marcus built simple tools from materials they scavenged, including sharp blades and basic projectile weapons made from elastic vines and sharp rocks. On the 6th rotation, they set their first real trap. They found a narrow canyon that led to a water source, a place where hunters would naturally patrol. Derek positioned the team in the high rocks on either side, while Marcus rigged a trap using salvaged wire and a heavy stone. They waited for hours until a Kralathi hunter entered the canyon, moving with the confident stride of an apex predator. Jake gave the signal. Marcus triggered the trap, and the heavy stone swung down from above, striking the Kralathi in the side. The hunter stumbled, roaring in pain and surprise. Before it could recover, Amy and Lisa dropped nets they had woven from strong vines, entangling the alien's multiple limbs. Derek threw sharpened sticks at its exposed joints, while Jake rushed forward with a blade made from sharpened metal salvaged from a cache. The Kralathi fought desperately, its strength terrifying even when wounded and trapped. It nearly broke free twice, its claws slashing at the air dangerously close to Lisa. But the humans kept attacking from different angles, never giving it a chance to focus on one target. Jake found an opening and drove his blade deep into the joint between the hunter's armor plates, right where Lisa had identified as vulnerable. The Kralathi let out a final roar and collapsed. The humans stood around it, breathing hard, unable to believe what they had just accomplished. They had killed one of their hunters. "Take his equipment," Derek said, his voice steady despite the shaking in his hands. "Everything he has, we can use." They stripped the dead hunter of its armor, weapons, and communication devices. Marcus was particularly interested in the rifle, studying its construction with fascination. The weapon was energy-based, powered by a compact cell that seemed to have significant charge remaining. As they worked, the dead hunter's communication device activated. Another Kralathi's voice came through, speaking in their growling language. "Kraxon, report your status. You claimed you had the humans cornered." The humans looked at each other. Jake picked up the device and pressed what he hoped was the transmit button. "Kraxon is dead. We killed him. If you want us, come and get us." There was a long silence. Then the voice returned, filled with rage. "Impossible. Prey does not kill hunters. You lie. Come see for yourself," Jake replied, then crushed the device under his heel. The news spread through the Kralathi network like fire. The humans listened to the chatter on other devices they had collected, hearing the shock and disbelief in the hunters' voices. Some demanded immediate action. Others insisted it must be a trick or malfunction. Lord Vraxis himself made another broadcast, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Kraxon has fallen. Whether through luck or skill, the humans have claimed their first kill. This cannot stand. I am authorizing additional hunters to enter the preserve. These humans will be brought down, and their corpses will be displayed as a reminder that prey is prey, no matter how clever." More hunters meant more opportunities. The humans continued to study, plan, and prepare. Marcus learned to use the Kralathi weapons, teaching the others how to fire them. The rifles had tremendous power but needed to be aimed carefully. They had limited ammunition, so every shot had to count. Lisa developed a poison using native plants that Rix had showed them. It would not kill a Kralathi, but it would make them sick and slow, evening the odds further. Derek created a network of traps throughout their territory, marking safe paths that only the humans knew. On the 8th rotation, 3 hunters entered the preserve together, breaking tradition because of the humiliation the humans had caused. Jake saw this as an opportunity. He led the crew in a coordinated ambush, using the terrain to separate the hunters and attacking each one individually, while the others were too far away to help. The first hunter fell to a pit trap covered with vegetation. It broke its leg in the fall and was quickly overwhelmed. The second hunter pursued Amy into what it thought was a dead end, only to find the rest of the crew waiting and hiding. They brought it down with concentrated fire from stolen weapons. The third hunter realized what was happening and tried to flee. But Derek had anticipated this and created barriers that funneled it toward another trap. It died confused and alone, unable to understand how prey had become predator. With each victory, the humans grew more confident and more capable. They now had multiple weapons, better armor adapted from Kralathi gear, and most importantly, they had proven something to themselves. They could fight back. They could win. But Jake knew the real test was still coming. Lord Vraxis would not tolerate this humiliation much longer. The High Huntmaster would come personally, bringing with him the elite of Kralathi hunters. And when that happened, the humans would need to be ready for the fight of their lives. As the 9th rotation began, Jake gathered his crew around a small fire in their hidden camp. They looked different now than they had when they first arrived. They were harder, sharper, marked by scars and experience. They were survivors, and they were done being prey. "They are coming for us with everything they have," Jake said quietly. "Vraxis will not stop until we are dead, or he is. We need to prepare for a final confrontation." "Good," Derek said, checking the charge on his rifle. "I am tired of running. Let them come." The Kralathi Empire was in chaos, though the humans did not fully understand the depth of it yet. Through their captured communication devices, they heard fragments of heated debates and angry proclamations. The concept that prey could systematically kill hunters violated something fundamental in Kralathi culture. Their entire society was built on the certainty that they were the ultimate predators, the top of the galactic food chain. The humans had shattered that certainty. Jake's crew had moved their base to a more defensible position, a small cave system in a rocky hillside that overlooked a large section of the jungle. Marcus had rigged the approaches with traps and early warning systems made from salvaged Kralathi technology. They now had enough weapons and equipment to outfit themselves properly, taken from the hunters they had killed over the past rotations. 11 of them dead, Amy said one evening as she cleaned her rifle. 11 Kralathi hunters. And we are still alive. My younger self would never have believed this possible. Lisa was working on their medical supplies, using both human first aid knowledge and what she had learned from studying Kralathi medicine. "We have been lucky too. If any of us had taken a serious injury, we might not have made it. These aliens are incredibly dangerous, even when we have the advantage." "Luck and skill both," Derek corrected. He was at the cave entrance, keeping watch as he always did. "But mostly, we have won because we think different than they do. They hunt alone. We fight together. They rely on strength and speed. We use planning and endurance. Every advantage they have, we have found a way to counter." Marcus looked up from the device he was working on, his face illuminated by the soft glow of alien circuits. "I have been analyzing their communication networks more deeply. The Kralathi are arguing among themselves. Some want to send more hunters. Others are calling for the preserve to be destroyed from orbit with us inside it. But Lord Vraxis has forbidden that option. He insists on taking us down personally to restore honor." "When will he come?" Jake asked. "Soon. Maybe 2 more rotations at most. He is gathering what they call the elite guard, the finest hunters in their empire. When they come, it will not be 3 or 4. It will be dozens, all working under Vraxis's command." Jake felt his stomach tighten. They had been successful against individual hunters, even small groups, but dozens of elite warriors led by their greatest huntmaster would be a different challenge entirely. "Then we need to prepare this entire area," Jake said, gesturing to the jungle around them. "We turn every meter of terrain into a weapon. We make them pay for every step they take toward us. They spent the next rotation doing exactly that. Derek led the effort to create a defensive perimeter, using every trick he knew and inventing new ones. They dug pits and covered them carefully. They rigged trees to fall when triggered. They created false trails that led to dead ends and ambush points. Marcus built explosive devices using the power cells from Kralathi weapons. Crude but effective, Rix and the other surviving members of his species helped, showing them techniques they had learned during their years of survival. The insect-like aliens were experts at camouflage and creating hidden passages. Together, they turned the hillside into a maze of dangers that only the humans and their allies could navigate safely. Amy used her pilot knowledge to study the Kralathi patrol vessels that occasionally flew overhead. She noticed they followed predictable patterns and relied heavily on their sensors. Marcus built a device that could emit false signals, making the sensors read heat signatures where nothing existed. They used this to create decoy positions that would draw fire away from their real locations. On the morning of the 13th rotation, they saw the ships arriving. Not one or two patrol vessels, but a full landing fleet. Jake counted at least 20 craft descending toward the preserve, each one carrying multiple hunters. Through the communication devices, they heard Lord Vraxis addressing his forces. The humans have embarrassed us long enough. They have violated the natural order and must be destroyed. I will lead you personally into their territory. We will find them, corner them, and end this humiliation. Every hunter who participates will share in the glory of this kill. The humans may be clever prey, but they are still prey. We are Kralathi, and we do not lose. The ships landed several kilometers away, far enough that the humans could not directly attack them but close enough that the hunters could reach them quickly. Through their stolen viewing devices, Jake watched as Vraxis himself emerged from the largest ship. The High Huntmaster was enormous, even by Kralathi standards, his scales darker and his armor more elaborate than any they had seen. He carried a weapon that crackled with energy, and his movements showed a lifetime of combat experience. Here they come, Derek said, watching through the scope of his rifle. At least 40 hunters, maybe more. They are moving in formation, sweeping through the jungle. Professional and disciplined. Let them come into our territory, Jake replied. We know every rock and tree here, they do not. The Kralathi advanced with military precision. Nothing like the confident individual hunters they had faced before. They moved in coordinated groups, covering each other and communicating constantly. When they reached the first of the trap lines, they detected it and disabled it carefully. But the humans had anticipated this. The early traps were meant to be found, to make the Kralathi confident in their ability to spot dangers. The real traps were deeper in, more cleverly hidden, and more deadly. The first group of hunters entered a clearing that seemed safe. Derek waited until they were in the center before triggering the trap. Trees rigged with Marcus's explosive devices detonated, sending shrapnel flying. 3 hunters fell immediately. The others scattered, firing blindly at the surrounding jungle. From their hidden positions, the humans returned fire. Amy hit a hunter in the exposed joint of its shoulder. Lisa's shot struck another in one of its multiple eyes. The Kralathi took cover, their formation broken by the ambush. But Vraxis responded quickly, his voice cutting through the chaos. Reform and advance. They cannot be everywhere. Push through their traps and find them. The hunters obeyed, regrouping and continuing forward, despite their losses. Jake had to admire their discipline even as he fired at them. These were not arrogant sport hunters. These were warriors who had trained for this their entire lives. The battle continued throughout the day, a running fight through the jungle. The humans fell back through prepared positions, triggering traps and firing from cover before retreating to the next defensive line. The Kralathi pressed forward relentlessly, taking casualties but never stopping. By evening, both sides had paid a heavy price. The humans had lost Rix and 2 of his companions to Kralathi fire. Jake himself had a burn across his ribs where an energy blast had nearly hit him. Amy was limping from a fall, and Marcus had a deep cut on his arm. But they had killed at least 15 hunters and wounded many more. The Kralathi made camp for the night, and the humans used the darkness to their advantage. Derek led a raid on their perimeter, killing 2 sentries silently before vanishing back into the jungle. Lisa poisoned their water supply with the toxin she had developed, sickening several hunters before morning. When dawn came, Vraxis himself took the field, leading the remaining hunters personally. The humans watched from their final defensive position as the High Huntmaster approached, his massive form moving with deadly grace. Humans. Vraxis's voice boomed through speakers, amplified so they could hear. You have fought well for prey. You have earned a warrior's death. Surrender now, and I will make your ends quick and honorable. Continue to resist, and I will make sure you suffer before you die. The final assault came with the fury of a storm. Lord Vraxis led from the front, his elite guard fanning out on either side as they charged up the hillside toward the cave system where the humans had made their last stand. Energy blasts tore through the air, burning vegetation and shattering stone. The ground shook with the thunder of Kralathi warriors moving in perfect formation. Jake and his crew fired back from their prepared positions, making every shot count. Amy's aim was steady despite her exhaustion, dropping hunters who exposed themselves too long. Marcus had rigged the last of their explosive devices along the approach, and he detonated them in sequence, creating walls of fire that forced the Kralathi to adjust their advance. Derek moved between positions with practiced efficiency, always appearing where he was needed most. When 3 hunters broke through on the left flank, he was there to drive them back with precise fire. When another group tried to scale the cliff face, he dropped rocks that sent them tumbling back down. Lisa coordinated their defense, her calm voice cutting through the chaos. Amy. 3 coming up the center path. Marcus. Reload and cover the right side. Jake. Vraxis is pushing toward the main entrance. The High Huntmaster was a force of nature. His armor deflected shots that would have killed lesser warriors. His weapon fired with devastating accuracy, forcing the humans to keep their heads down. He moved with confidence born from thousands of successful hunts, absolutely certain of his victory. But as the battle raged, something began to change. The Kralathi, despite their superior numbers and equipment, were tiring. Their bursts of incredible speed and strength came at a cost, and hours of continuous combat were wearing them down. The humans, by contrast, maintained their steady pace. They were exhausted, yes, but they kept fighting with methodical determination. This was what Vraxis had not anticipated. He had faced countless prey species, all of them eventually succumbing to fear and fatigue. But humans were different. They were persistence hunters, creatures whose evolution had trained them to never give up, to keep moving long after their prey had collapsed. The Kralathi might be stronger, but they had not evolved to fight for hours without rest. As the sun climbed higher, the tide began to turn. The elite guard, once moving with perfect coordination, started making mistakes. A hunter fired too eagerly and exposed his position. Another took cover in a spot that Derek had prepared as a kill zone. One by one, the numbers dwindled. Vraxis saw what was happening and roared in frustration. They are just humans. Weak prey from a primitive world. We are Kralathi. We do not lose to prey. But the universe did not care about Kralathi pride. The humans continued to fight with grim determination, using every advantage they had earned through blood and planning. When the Kralathi charged, the humans fell back. When the Kralathi slowed, the humans counterattacked. They gave ground, but never broke, forcing their enemies to work for every meter gained. Marcus ran out of ammunition for his rifle and switched to the blade they had crafted from salvaged metal. When a hunter broke through to his position, he met it head-on, dodging its powerful strikes and targeting the vulnerable joints Lisa had identified. The Kralathi was stronger and faster, but Marcus was smarter. He led it into a narrow passage where its size became a disadvantage, and there he brought it down. Amy's rifle overheated from constant firing, and she tossed it aside without hesitation. She grabbed a Kralathi weapon from a fallen hunter and kept firing, adapting to the alien design through pure necessity. When 2 hunters cornered her, she used the terrain to her advantage, leading them into a collapse trap that buried them under stone. Lisa had long since stopped being just their medic. She fought with cold precision, her shots carefully aimed at the spots where she knew Kralathi anatomy was weakest. When a hunter got too close, she used a spear Marcus had fashioned, driving it into the soft tissue beneath its armor plates. Derek was everywhere at once, his security training pushed to its absolute limit. He saved Marcus from a flanking hunter, pulled Amy out of a collapsing position, and provided covering fire when Jake needed to reload. His presence held their defense together when it should have crumbled, and Jake led them through it all. Not with speeches or grand gestures, but with steady determination. When someone needed direction, he provided it. When someone needed encouragement, he gave it. He had become what his crew needed him to be. Not a captain of a transport ship, but a leader of survivors who refused to die. By midday, only 5 of the elite guard remained, and they were all wounded. Vraxis stood among the bodies of his fallen warriors, his armor scorched and cracked, his multiple eyes fixed on the cave entrance where the humans waited, and for the first time, Jake saw something in those eyes that might have been uncertainty. "You should have been easy prey," Vraxis said, his voice carrying the weight of disbelief. "Everything about you says you are weak. Fragile skin, poor natural weapons, limited speed and strength. How are you still alive?" Jake stepped out from cover, his own weapon leveled at the High Huntmaster. His body was covered in cuts and burns, his simple clothing torn and bloodied. But his eyes were clear, and his hands were steady. "You looked at us and saw what we are not," Jake said. "You saw that we are not as strong as you, not as fast, not as naturally armed. But you never looked at what we are. We are persistence. We are adaptation. We are the species that chased prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. We are the ones who turned every disadvantage into a tool for survival. You wanted to hunt us, and you never realized that humans are the greatest hunters Earth ever produced." Vraxis raised his weapon, but Jake was already moving. The hours of combat had taught him to read Kralathi body language, to predict their movements. He rolled aside as the energy blast scorched the ground where he had stood, and he fired back, his shot striking Vraxis in the exposed joint of his arm. The High Huntmaster dropped his weapon and charged instead, closing the distance with terrifying speed. His claws reached for Jake, capable of tearing him apart, but Derek was there. His blade finding the gap in Vraxis's armor, Amy fired from the side, her shot blinding one of his eyes. Marcus hit him low while Lisa struck from above. They swarmed him, not fighting with honor or glory, but with the practical brutality of predators taking down prey. Vraxis fought back desperately, his strength still formidable, but he was alone, and they were together. That made all the difference. The High Huntmaster fell to his knees, his body pierced in a dozen places. He looked up at Jake, and in his eyes was something that might have been respect, or might have been fear. "How?" Vraxis asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We never stopped," Jake replied. "That is what humans do. We never stop." Angrily, Vraxis died there on the hillside, surrounded by the bodies of his elite guard. The humans stood over him, breathing hard, barely able to believe they had survived. In the distance, they could see the remaining Kralathi forces retreating to their ships, unwilling to face the prey that had become predators. Marcus grabbed one of the functioning communication devices and activated it, broadcasting on all Kralathi frequencies. Jake stepped forward, knowing this moment would define everything that came after. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. You brought us here to hunt us for sport. You wanted to prove your superiority, to add our skulls to your trophy walls. Instead, you have learned a hard truth. Humans do not accept being prey. We will fight with everything we have, for as long as it takes, and we will never surrender. Vraxis is dead. His elite guard is dead. If you come for us again, you will share their fate." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But we do not want war. We want to go home. Release us, and every other species you have imprisoned in your preserves. Let us leave in peace, and we will let you keep your lives." Refuse, and we will show you what it truly means to be hunted. The response came hours later, from someone who identified themselves as the Kralathi Council of Elders. Their voice carried a tone the translator interpreted as shock and resignation. Your terms are accepted. Ships will arrive to transport you and the other survivors to your homeworlds. The hunting preserves will be closed, and humans will be declared protected under galactic law. No Kralathi will ever hunt your species again. The ships came as promised. Jake and his crew, along with Rix and the few other survivors, were treated with careful respect by the Kralathi crew who transported them. The aliens looked at the humans with a mixture of fear and fascination, unable to reconcile these small, seemingly fragile beings with the creatures who had destroyed their greatest hunters. During the long journey back to human space, Jake stood at a viewport watching the stars. Amy joined him, her arm in a sling but her spirit unbroken. Do you think they will really leave us alone? She asked. Yes, Jake said with certainty. We broke something in their culture. Something they built their entire society on. They cannot think of humans as prey anymore. We proved that we are predators too, maybe the most dangerous kind. The horizon had been returned to them, repaired, and refueled. When they finally docked at a human colony station, they were greeted as heroes. Their story spread across human space, and then, across the galaxy, the species that had been hunted and turned the tables on their hunters, the prey that became predators. But Jake refused the accolades and the celebrations. He gathered his crew one last time in the horizon's common area, the same place where they had gathered before their capture, back when they were just a transport crew on a routine run. We survived because we worked together, Jake said. Because we adapted and refused to give up. That is the human way. Not because we are the strongest or the fastest, but because we are the most persistent. Remember that. They went their separate ways eventually, each carrying the scars and memories of their time in the preserve. But they had changed the galaxy. The Kralathi dismantled their hunting preserves. Other species who had been prey found courage in the human example. And throughout the stars, when beings spoke of Earth and its people, they did so with new respect. The humans had been hunted for sport. They had faced the greatest predators the galaxy had ever known. And in the end, they had proven a fundamental truth that the Kralathi learned too late. On Earth, humans were not the fastest or strongest, but they were the ones who survived. They were the ones who never stopped running, never stopped fighting, never stopped adapting. They were persistence hunters, and that made them the most dangerous predators of all. The hunt had ended. The tables had turned, and the galaxy would never forget. Jake looked at his crew, seeing the exhaustion and pain on their faces. They were out of traps, low on ammunition, and facing an enemy that still outnumbered them. By any logical measure, they should surrender. But humans had never been good at accepting logical defeat. No, Jake shouted back. We do not surrender. You brought us here to hunt. Well, now you know what it feels like to be hunted. Come and get us if you can. Vraxis let out a roar of rage and charged forward, his elite guard following. The final battle had begun, and Jake knew that only one side would walk away from it. He gripped his weapon tightly, feeling the weight of it in his hands, and prepared to fight for every second of life he had left. The High Huntmaster wanted a hunt. Jake would give him a war. The others nodded in agreement. They had learned to fight. They had learned to survive. Now they would learn to win, or they would die trying. Either way, the Kralathi would never forget the humans who turned the hunt around and became the hunters instead of the hunted. He had simply refused to stop running. Jake eventually circled back and found his crew at a predetermined meeting point they had discussed. They were all there, all alive. Amy explained that her hunter had given up after she led it through thick swamp water. Marcus had climbed into the canopy and waited until his pursuer left. Lisa had hidden in a hollow log, and Derek had actually doubled back and threw rocks at his hunter from a distance, frustrating it until it withdrew. They looked at each other, and despite everything, they smiled. The Kralathi had expected easy prey, terrified victims who would run blindly until they were caught. Instead, they had found humans who thought, planned, and adapted. "They do not know what they have started," Derek said quietly. Jake nodded, feeling something change inside him. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with determination and even a touch of anger. "No, they do not. And we are going to teach them." The screen went dark, leaving Jake and his crew in stunned silence. He looked at Amy, who was pale and shaking. Marcus had his face in his hands. Lisa was checking herself for injuries with clinical detachment, probably trying to stay focused. Derek was gripping the bars of his cage, his jaw set in anger. Jake forced himself to breathe slowly and think clearly. They were going to be hunted. They were going to die unless they found a way out of this nightmare. But looking at his crew, seeing their fear and desperation, he made a decision. He was not going to let that happen. Somehow, some way, they were going to survive. And if these Kralathi wanted a hunt, then Jake would make sure they got more than they bargained for.